Hello, Rabbi. Good
Hi,
morning.
Lois. How are you?
I am well, thank you. And yourself?
Oh, very well. Thank you. Baruch Hashem. Great.
Baruch Hashem.
Thank
I,
you.
I just want to say one thing about last night's class. I kept thinking,
Yeah.
um, given how obsessive our religion is with words, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact, and explanations, especially who we're learning today,
Yeah.
right? It's more like you want us to be Buddhists than Jews.
I would say that there is some wisdom there. I don't want us to be Buddhists rather than Jews because
No, I
nothing,
know.
also, nothing is not, in other words, just to say things without giving direction, it's not ultimately better. It's just you need both. You need all the words. You need all the ideas because we're there. You can't ignore.
Interrupt for 1 second because I stay. I have
What?
somebody setting up a computer for me
Okay.
for a job to do.
Okay. No
I
problem.
will see you when I see you.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay, Liz.
All right. Be well. Yeah. So the thing is, we're already there. Once you're already there, you can't just totally erase it because it doesn't help. Somehow you have to have the words but not take them more seriously than they need to be. So
I think I understand. Thank you.
but I don't know if the Rambam, I don't know
Huh?
what the I don't know what the Rambam would say about this because
Right.
because also even this has it, if you hold on too tight to any of this, then it also because it's all we're all still talking about words and concepts and everything, but somehow I guess the best because I mean if it says we're avadim, then there's something to it. It doesn't help to erase it because then, but at the same time, to limit it to that is
I
we
think I
tend to, and that's where we
right.
make most of our mistakes. So you
Right.
could use some of that language to get off of our mistakes. But so yeah, so it can sound Buddhist, but ultimately where Buddhism goes with it is not helpful to us either. So yeah.
Are you saying that there's something about the experiential aspect of something that's non-cognitive? No matter how hard we try, we can't have discourse about it. If it's something that's essentially private to us, how do I communicate it to you?
Right. So, I mean, somebody might. It depends. I mean, I like the notion of pointing to something rather than
Sure, ostensive definition.
Right. So I guess the only way I could really share it with you is if we're both there. But if we're not both there, I might be able to give clues to where I am, where I'm looking. In poetry, sometimes that's what you're trying to find. You're trying to find the perspective. Like, let's say somebody's describing a cat in a doorway or something like that. You're trying to find the perspective so that you could sort of see it from where he's seeing it. So it could be that the value of talking about it is that it shares clues, and then what we would do is share the experience. Like at Matan Torah, everybody's having a shared experience. There's something about that is qualitatively different. That's why, as it's pointed out in the Torah, you all saw it. There's something about the shared experience that allows people to talk about it. But even when you're talking about it, it's like an inside joke. even if you get told the joke, it doesn't really help for the people that aren't on the inside. So it's got to be something like that. So there has to be an assumption that we can go back to some shared experience, and that we sort of get it from the shared experience. But especially the thing that is most critical about it is just recognizing how I got to this limited place, why it's so hard for me, why it's so hard for me to relate to God now, where it wasn't so hard for me to relate to God when I was 6. And I really do think that part of the problem is because I have a certain amount of information, and I'm assuming that somehow God has to fit in to what I can describe. And then if I can't solve the problem of God's foreknowledge and free will, it suddenly in my mind, this is a problem about relating to God. It never was necessary before, but now it's become a problem. But a lot of the reason I think that it's a problem is because I think that everything has to fit into what I know. And what I think I know is the words and the definitions. That's not all that I know. I can't, even you know, with the Rambam, again, it doesn't fit all the language. If there's an assumption that you can mix and match what the Rambam says in his Parish HaMishnayos and what he says in the Guide for the Perplexed, or what he says in his Sefer Mitzvot, or what he says in his codes, that somehow they represent a unified work, and that you can mix and match them. He doesn't always say, the same thing in all of these. But let's say you could mix and match them and you treat them as one grand work, then even his statements, like, remember we were having that conversation. I don't remember what the person said about the Rambam, but they were saying something like, remember, it was something about the Rambam, that it's all about the rational, it's all about knowing.
Yeah.
Remember how, I don't remember the
Noah
exact.
Feldman.
Yeah, remember what he said? It was just sort of.
In passing. He just
Right, he said
said,
it in
well,
passing.
right. He said, I don't know anyone who would think it's all logical. Well, maybe the Rambam, like that.
Right, yeah. So, but then you see like the Rambam talking and let's say about prophecy, or about, he uses the word knowledge, or active intelligence, or things like that. But he seems to be using like a broader sense of what lada'at means, for instance. I can't believe even the Rambam, when he's talking about these things, is not speaking, he's not using words that he recognizes have like some kind of broader meaning, but he's sort of limited by the words. And that it does have to meld into something experiential. It's just that he feels that the pathway to the experiential is through the intellect, but somehow when you arrive, let's say in prophecy, in Nevuah, it's not just, numbers and equations and things like that, that there's layers of experience that at some point become unspeakable. Even though a Navi does communicate what he saw, but there's recognition that it doesn't represent the totality of what they saw. It's their attempt to communicate what they saw. Again, it's not the Rambam, it's others, but it could be the Rambam himself says this, but others like the Abarbanel will suggest that many many prophets are seeing the same thing, but depending on who they are and the depth of their faculties, they're communicating it differently. So when Yeshayahu is communicating something, he has the great gifts of articulation. When Yirmiyahu's doing it, he says at one point, Yirmiyahu's young, he's a teenager, he's seeing some of these things, but he doesn't have Yeshayahu's faculty, so he's not able to express it to the depth that Yeshayahu can express it. So again, I don't know if the Rambam ever says anything like that, but this seems it has to be, because there's the various commentaries find themselves ranking the prophets for depth of understanding, etc. Yeshayahu always comes like towards the top of the list. So it seems like it's sort of universally accepted that there's more to the prophetic experience than what the prophet is communicating. What all we have is what they communicated about, but we don't, by hearing their communication, we don't have the experience. And so even though you might call it something like knowing, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is available to language and expression, or even sharing, something like that. Obviously, talking about not being able to talk about it is the great paradox. A lot of times you'll hear people say that they'll talk about unlearning, at a certain stage, unlearning. The Baal Shem Tov saying that we need to daven like a child, and there's depth to what they're saying, and that, but you also can't just ignore whatever we've collected, because that also doesn't work.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but Wittgenstein, he said he tries to build a scaffolding which he demolishes at the end and try and understand, and he concludes you cannot F the ineffable.
But did he feel it was therefore there was no valuable in creating the scaffold before he knocked it down?
It was like a heuristic that is to point you in the right direction, but the scaffolding, you couldn't really surmount the hurdle, but you got to realize you couldn't surmount the hurdle. So
it's teaching that, yeah.
It's what?
No, you said it was heuristic. Teaching.
It was heuristic, but his conclusion was really like with philosophy that it's really a useless task, that you're using language for a purpose for which it wasn't suited. Language is.
But would he acknowledge that building it and then knocking it down, you're better off than if you never built it? Or would he say it wasn't a worthwhile thing to even build it?
It was probably not a worthwhile thing to build it, because it rested on confusions, and
right.
That's what he was.
So, but is there nothing that can be learned? Like, so somebody might say you need to build it and then knock it down, but you did gain from building it and knocking it down. You're better. Somebody could argue, like apparently isn't, but somebody could argue that you're in a better place because you built it and knock it down, that there's something gained from having built it and knocking it down, and then building something else and knocking it down, and building something else and knocking it down. So at the same time that you're discarding what you built, but there's something somehow gained in the process, especially if you ask yourself, like, what Kahneman and Tversky, they were able to learn from the mistakes that we make.
Yes.
Right. And there must be, some explanation for why I thought X, Y, Z. It might be wrong that I thought it, but maybe something could be learned from the process. And also good practice to let it go, because if I've invested so much in the design, there's a Gemara that Rabbi Rosner often brings up. It's the Gemara says that Rabbi Shmuel used to, he was Doresh as Kol HaEsen Shabbatorah. Every time it said et, like Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, every time in the Torah it said et, you could learn something from it.
Right.
Just want to see where that Gemara is, because this was a beautiful idea.
Did it have pluralities, something like that?
Right there, it ended up, he got to a problem that he couldn't solve.
Right, because of Hashem, he was the exception.
Right.
That's my vague memory.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, but there was language in this thing. Let's see. Problem is, I'm trying to search it in English, and I may have to try to search it in Hebrew. It's okay.
Wait.
All right, I'm going to try again here in Hebrew.
Wait.
Yeah, so one of the incredible things about it was that he had built this system, and who knows how long it took him to build this system. But once he decided that it led to an impossible place, he tossed it. He tossed the whole system. And this is just a monumental, here, it's Psachim Kaf Beis. One second, I think this is it.
Wait.
Psachim Kaf Beis number Beis.
You move.
Yeah.
Get this. Oh, it's not Rabbi Shmuel, it's Shimon HaAmsuni. So Shimon, so the Brisa says Shimon HaAmsuni, and some say it was Nehemiah HaAmsuni, had Doresh Kol HaEtzim Shabbatorah. He had he had sought out literally all the S's in the Torah. Kevan shehigia Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, that you should fear the Lord your God. Pirish, he didn't just stop, he let it go. So he just gave up his system. Amrilo Tamida, his student says, Kola Esim Shedarashta Mate'alel. What happens to all the previous ones that you explained? Amar lahem kashem shekibalti schar ala drisha kach ani mikabel schar ala prisha. Just like I received reward for seeking them out, so too I'm going to receive reward for letting them go. Ad shabar Rabbi Akiva bedorash. Then until Rabbi Akiva came and he taught Es Hashem Elokecha Tira. What does it mean? Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, that you should be in awe of the Lord your God. L'rabos Tamidei Chachamim. This includes Tamidei Chachamim. So it seems like his problem was there's nothing with God. There's nothing with God. So it seemed like Et Hashem had, according to his system, it had to mean that there was something with God. So this was a flaw in his system. So he gave it up. He gave up the whole system. And then Rabbi Akiva said, it means the Talmidei Chachamim, that the Talmidei Chachamim are with God. So I forgot who it was that he quoted. It might have been Rav Matisyahu Solomon or somebody like that, somebody very contemporary. But he quoted him as saying that why was Rabbi Akiva able to do this, but Shimon HaSuni or Nehemiah HaSuni wasn't able to see it? Because Rabbi Akiva saw what he did. He saw him give up this project, the willingness to let go of something that he had put that much effort into. And the kind of radiant example of Shimon HaSuni was what enlightened Rabbi Akiva, and who could see the sort of divine in this process of letting go of what he created. And so that allowed him to make that drasha. The Rabbi Akiva was able to say that what allowed him to do it is because he saw Reb Shimon HaSuni or Nehemiah HaSuni, whichever it is. He saw what he did, and that enlightened his eyes. But there you have the language in this brisa where he built it and then he let it go. And he says there was reward in building it and there was reward in letting it go. So I don't know if it's what he meant, but I could certainly see the language being useful for this notion that nothing that, in a certain sense, nothing that we can construct is going to be the truth, entirely. But
Perhaps
there is schar in building it, and there's also schar in letting it go, and that might be a kind of model for our process. That even when we let it, even after we let it go, there was value in building it. When the Buddhists, they do these, some Buddhists, I don't know which ones, they do these sand mandalas, like these intricate, beautiful sand, they're almost like paintings. And so they'll spend hours and hours and hours constructing it, and they're absolutely beautiful. And then they erase it. So usually when I've heard people talk about it, they're talking about this as a way to experience the temporal nature of the world, the notion that everything is temporal, that it's always changing, etc. But it also, you could say there is, what was the point of all those hours spent if you're just going to erase it? But this kind of practice, I could see that kind of practice of creating and then erasing it and creating and then erasing it would be good practice. Rabbi Foreman was talking, I was talking to him one time a couple years ago, and he said there's a sort of an embarrassment when he looks at printed material that he's written before, like his books. He was talking about his writings, his books, because it's always evolving. His understanding of these things is always evolving. So by the time, if it's a few years since he wrote something, he's at a different place now. But the thing about the book is it just fixes it in time. It's like a photograph. A photograph is just 1 second of reality. It's, and even then it's sort of artificial. So you sort of struggle when you look back, like there's a part of you that wishes you never wrote it, because now that's what's there, but he's like in a different place with his understanding of what that was. So
it's difficult a lot of times for a person to give up a theory that he's put a lot of time in, especially if he's made a great reputation for his writing. And
Right.
that's like one of the people that I admire most in history was Kepler.
Kepler.
Kepler. Now he came up, he has his 3 laws of planetary motion. Now he originally believed that the planets moved in circles. So he did, and in order to calculate these things, he made all of these elaborate calculations. This was before they had computers. This was before they had logarithms. And so he's doing all these things. He realized he was wrong after 15 years of labor. He gave it up and he came up with a new theory. And Wittgenstein was the same thing. He had his, first of all, the Tractatus, which was in effect a metaphysical system. And then in the later work of the investigations, he dismantled metaphysics because that was his emphasis then on ordinary language and how it's used and how it's misused, and how philosophers are flies looking their way out of the fly bottle. If they only look, they find out that the bottle was open. And he had all these things about, that, but to do something like that is really quite remarkable.
I remember at the beginning of TLC, we brought in Rabbi Cardoza, and he was doing a sort of question and answer thing, and people were asking questions, and he said, "Good question, I don't know." Afterwards, I said, I've heard you give this, I know you have answers to that question. Why didn't you answer them? And he said, I don't, something to the effect of, I don't agree with them anymore. and also Aviva Zornberg, she gave a lecture, Moses and the Black Sun or something like that. And I was talking to her and I said, well, what about what you wrote, like this beautiful thing that she wrote in this book, Women Writing About Ruth. She had an essay in it, like a I don't know, 20-something page essay, 30-something page essay that they included in that book. And it was just fantastic, about Ruth representing Chesed and how Chesed follows in the wake of suffering, and almost reliably follows in the wake of suffering. And that's this important theme from the book of Ruth, etc. And it seemed like she had just ignored it in this Moses and the Black Sun. And she said, yeah, because I don't believe it anymore.
Now,
and then I go, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? Like I was showing her, like, even when Moshe's in the cave and it's a dark, in the crevice, which she envisions more like a cave. Even when he's in the cave and it's dark and he's wondering why is there suffering? Hashem, the image is Hashem puts his hand out. And I said, a stretched hand, that is a symbol of Chesed. This outstretched hand is a symbol of Chesed.
Right.
And so I'm giving her all these examples, and she goes, okay, you win. She wouldn't. I mean, it was like, all right, you win. But clearly she was not, she left it. She had left it. To me, it was a work of art, and it solved so many things. She had left it, but I'm still holding on to it. That was also, this is really about the story of 2 monks that were going by the river. They were walking by a river, and there was a woman bathing in the river, and suddenly it sounds like she's drowning. So they rush into the river, and one of the monks picks her up and takes her out of the river, sets her down, makes sure she's okay. And then the 2 of them continue their walking. And after like an hour or 2, the other monk says to the one who had picked her up, he said, I can't believe you did that. You were holding a naked woman. it's just so surprising and unacceptable. And the monk said, I set her down on the other side of the river, but you've been holding her now for the last few hours. It's like this notion of being able to let go. And also David Foreman suggests that it's a necessary part of creativity. He was saying it's one of the reasons we celebrate Shabbos, that Shabbos is also part of the creativity. Shabbos is not a separate thing from the 6 days. Shabbos is like the culmination of the 6 days, because creativity requires letting go. If you don't let go, then you destroy. Eventually, it gets destroyed. If you don't stop painting, if you don't stop editing, if you don't stop whatever, if you can't let go of it, at some point you destroy the thing itself. So that thing about letting go, it's even required even if you want the thing to remain. But this is taking it even farther. This is just recognizing the limitation. Whatever structure I come up with, it's possible that no human being could have done better than Newton. And eventually, hundreds of years later, much, or I don't know what percentage of Newton had to be discarded and let go for something else. And then at some other point, it's going to have to be our understanding of the subatomic world is going to have to be discarded. But somebody could argue you couldn't have gotten to the next stage if you hadn't had this one, even if you completely discard it. If you look at Aristotelian ideas, they seem so out of date and some of them embarrassingly wrong.
It doesn't have to be that far. There was phlogiston and the ether. All of those things were postulated by 1870.
100 years ago. Yeah, like 120 years ago or 100 years ago. So this is just taking that a little bit farther. Again, it would make people very nervous. Like if I said this in one of my closest friends passed away about 12 years ago, and his sons, who have grown into Talmidei Chachamim, and they every once in a while we come into contact with each other, but they always jokingly say that almost everything they see me write or they hear me say sounds like it's about to be heresy. And they go, one of them, Moshe, was saying to his brother Binyamin, they just reread something they had read a long time ago, and they said, there's two possibilities about what this means. One of them is heretical and one of them is not. Which one do you think he means? And then they had to ask me, which one do you mean? It's like, and I jokingly had said to them years ago, you're so afraid that if you think beyond the box, that somehow you're going to go to heresy. You can't get anywhere without thinking beyond the box. You have to, at some point, trust that you're seeking to a deeper understanding of Hashem, or you're seeking the truth. And if you're wrong, like that was something Ramosha Shapiro sort of mentored me in. He said, give me, I've mentioned this to you before, but he said, I want you to write your opinion about something that Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, there were a collection of his writings. They were, like Musar kind of writings, or maybe they were speeches, lectures he gave, I'm not sure, but they're collected in a volume. He said, I want you to read one of them, and then I want you to write your opinion about it so that I can read it. And I at first said, what do you mean my opinion about what Rabbi Yerucham says? And he said, yeah, you have an opinion. You have an opinion. You write your opinion. If it's not right, then you'll acknowledge that it was wrong, and then you'll move on, like you'll revise it or move on from it. But in other words, it's okay to make a mistake, there. It's, it's insisting on sticking in the mistake that would be wrong. And that's that thing about even the Rambam's Yud Gimel Ikrim. He knows full well that nobody reading his Ikrim is going to understand God's unity. You're not going to understand. We're not going to understand God's unity, which means that whatever picture we have is wrong. It's wrong. So why are we even trying it? Because that language of Shimon Hamsuni, you get reward for the seeking, and you get the reward for letting go of it. Something like that. I don't know. I don't know much about this, but I'm just, anyways. Okay, so I guess we'll leave this. And we're gonna have to leave it for an entire week because unfortunately I'm not gonna be able to learn with you. I'm not gonna be able to learn with you guys for good reason, which is that I'm going to 2 weddings. But one is in Florida and one is in New York. So Sunday is Florida, Tuesday night is in New York. So I'll be traveling and whatever. So I won't be able to learn with you guys, but we'll start up again the next week. And then I do not envision something getting in the way for a while.
Okay. You're going to all the Jewish places, Florida, New York.
Pilgrimages.
You
I
were
know,
in
I'm making
Israel.
pilgrims. I know. I once
by
was-
the way, happy Pesach Sheni today.
Happy Pesach Sheni. Happy
Yes.
Pesach.
Should I eat some matzahs? Just
Yes.
There are many people who have that. I think you should have matzah brie. Do you like matzah brie?
I love
Yeah.
Let's
Matzah
I
do
feel
it.
like it. Don't just
We
have
have to
plain
add it
matzah.
since
Should have
Pesach.
matzah.
Right. Okay.
Yes, and happy Pesach Sheni.
Happy Pesach Sheni.
Amen.
Liz, we are meeting tomorrow, and Lois. So
Yes,
Good.
okay.
Good.
All right. Be well.
I will see you in the morning.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Rabbi. Bye.
Bye-bye.